So I think interesting to think how mobility and democratic culture, you were saying it as well about being democratic in terms of well-designed mobility ensures that everyone who needs to get somewhere can get where they need to go. And a lack thereof can totally stifle. There's the lowest income neighborhood of Washington, D.C. is across the river from the main part of the city. And it has and D.C. actually has some serious topography. So in the middle of this neighborhood is a giant hill. That hill has a park on it, which is not a really great park. Most people don't even want to go in that park. And to get from one side of that hill to the other, you have to kind of go all the way around. But there's no good public transportation. The buses, I waited for a bus there once and it took me I could have walked to my destination, and I was looking at the schedule and trying to say when the next bus should be there. I could have easily walked to the destination by the time the bus actually finally showed up. So dysfunctional. And so what that leaves is that population of people who are the lowest population, the people who have the greatest needs for services, support, help to find get what they need in terms of food or education or job opportunities or whatever it might be. And they're left in this and on top of that, the planning of that part of the city happened in fits and starts, little kind of disconnected conditions. And much of it happened after World War II, which means it was like little suburban kind of planning, which makes it even harder to be mobile at all. And it's very disorienting. So that leaves that community divided, literally divided from each other. Their density is so low, they don't have good connectivity, they're lacking services, they're lacking even seeing each other. So from a democratic cultural point of view, they're lacking a voice even in their own city government because it's hard for them to even be in one place at one time and feel camaraderie together. But in the inverse, when you're in a neighborhood where there's excellent public transportation, when everyone is willing to either ride the bus or ride the subway, when I get back to New York this weekend is the beginning of the next mayoral election, right? Which is a big, important election for us. And I will feel camaraderie, on the bus, I'll probably hear people talking about the election. Where do the people that want to impact democracy in a city with good public transportation, where do they go? They go to where the public transportation is. And they're wearing their gear and saying, hey, I'm trying to raise money for this cause, or I'm handing out information about this candidate, right? So that's where democracy is actually happening in action, in real life, in daily life. If you have a public square, obviously, that people pass through, you'd probably do it there. But if you're in a city that's on a military grid and you have no real focus of a neighborhood center, then it's happening at the public transportation points. Even in Washington, D.C., it happens where the metro going underground is. So I think there's
social activities are happening.
Yes. So there must be something different about the democracy of me, interacting on my block or walking to the subway and having these different interactions from somebody whose daily life might be, in a car by themselves, moving from point A to point B and having almost no, literally they may not, besides going to say a supermarket or something, they may have very little contact with people they don't know throughout that daily life cycle.
No.
So that's the question of how that is in relation to, say, the viability and the vibrancy of democratic culture.
This is an important aspect as regards cars, and I love driving car, but not in historical cities. I like to walk, to see people. And I do not see people when I'm isolated in my car. It's a perfect means of keeping me off my environment.
Okay. In the historical city, the distances, the quality of the public spaces, as we said earlier, is something that is inviting to the stroll. It's, really, it is not facilitating at all the use of car. At the end, it's a problem to have a car. It is much better to walk and meet people and talk and do whatever you like.
Which its own political is walking through the city,
Yes.
not driving. This is one aspect. The other aspect I addressed beforehand deliberately is of a more fundamental nature. It depends on the degree of community. So what we addressed already, what we understand under a community. And perhaps we have different degrees. And in particular in modernity, as there was a German sociologist, Tönnies, at the end of the 19th century, with the rise of the big industrialized metropolises, he said, people, look, let's be honest, in Western societies today, we live in a society, not in a community any longer. The days of the community are over.
Right.
It's a more or less anonymous mass, let's call it society, and this is our basic way of living. If you want it or not, he said. If you take this, and if you take what we said yesterday about further alienation means, let's call it that way, via social media, these pseudo-communities being offered by social media. So all what we addressed yesterday, increasing the effect of Tönnies that we are living just and only in a society and no longer in communities. So if we take this as a background, and if we discuss about democracy and community, one aspect regarding democracy is the original concept, as the Greek polis-related original concept of democracy and the demos rules. This is a limited number of people. This was this point yesterday. I must have had a chance, or in a medieval Siena or in a medieval Parma, I must more or less, I know all the people, at least by seeing them. And when we go to vote in Athens, I know the people around. Not very closely, but it's a direct exchange, and I have a direct vote for a certain thing or against a certain thing. And there's been a protagonist for a certain thing that has the rhetor, that has to speak in front of all the people why his proposal is a good one. This is direct democracy. Today, and this was tied with the idea of community as the direct democracy. Okay. If we see today's organized democracies, as the so-called parliamentary democracies, there are no democracies in strict sense when compared to the original blueprint, to the model. Here we have the possibility to vote for some bureaucrats, for some managers, that they shall officially and formally, that they shall plea for our interests as voters. Well, okay, it's a very abstract process. There's no democratic process. And if we say that community relates on democracy, we would have to consider this relation between a direct democracy and community. It's not sufficient that I can vote for a manager, as a called politician, that he will go for my interest. For my interests? No. For the interests his party is propagating. And I have the choice. It's like a cafeteria approach. Do I like this cake or this cake or this cake? A bit ironically. And this is no democracy. And this is no community. So what we do is in this decentralization question, I'm provocative. I'm making a sketch in rough, in rough strokes, to line out the problem.
Probably we need to be very realistic. and admit that the ancient one was a democracy, so it was the people deciding. At a certain point, it was an oligarchy. Now it's a plutocracy. And in a plutocracy, there is no longer any space for democracy.
Exactly. I agree.
Unfortunately, this is what we are living now.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long it's going to be like that, because I think watching at the diagram of the whole human being history, there are always flow that are going up and down. And what everybody, I think, agree on this planet is that now we are in a condition that is very similar to the one of the end of the Roman Empire. And then we're going to have a Middle Ages.
Yeah, this would be.
I would just like to add something in favor of our poor democratic system, because I guess we shouldn't mix up the different levels of democratic representation, which is a crucial point to this discussion from my point of view. Because of course you can elect the people on a very local scale, which compares to the polis. That's your local deputies in the city council, or even in the, I guess in Karlsruhe, it's don't know how it's called. It's a Stadtteilrat or something, which is quite communal. And of course, you can always meet these people on the street and you can talk to them, and you can just have people voted, independent on which party list they are, but you can even mix up your voting and vote for the nose and not for the party. So there's all freedom as a Democrat as you can have. And I don't believe that in the Greek polis, when Athens started bargaining some treaties with Sparta or with any other city, everyone was involved. So that was some deputies that did. And that's the same thing we do as well, because our state members of parliament or our federal parliamentarians, of course, they got an advice of which the direction should be from the election, and then they do their jobs. So I wouldn't be this negative on this, because we got that shit. Yes, you want to project. Yes. And I just had to react on this. So very much. That's why I'm here. That's wonderful, this discussion.
Yeah, I think like we can be in the wrap-up mode in the sense that we can talk about central and polycentric, central and decentralized. And to your point, like you have a city of 8.5 million people. It's divided into 5 boroughs. There are 5 borough presidents. Each borough then has community boards. The community board is a scale down. You can quite easily get on your community board if you really want to. You can attend the community board meetings every time you see signs. You see on your corner on the street, it says, oh, somebody wants to do this with their building, and that actually requires the community board to weigh in. So here's the meeting, here's the time, go to the community board meeting. So that's pretty democratic, right? That's like a participatory government. Obviously, if I vote for the mayor, then I'm entrusting that the mayor is going to have a vision that will then go to, like I'm going to vote for the mayor if I think the mayor is going to help improve public transportation, prioritize public transportation or public education in the city, as opposed to privatizing something like Thatcherism versus, whatever the opposite of Thatcherism. Hopefully there's an opposite somewhere. So I think the polycentric city. So I think like there are moments even in large scale cities that you can feel community on the big scale. If there's a seismic event and you're all in this together. I mean, one example would be, say, of course, 9/11 was a seismic event in the city, but then 2 years later, there was a blackout. And of course, the blackout the blackout history in New York City is an interesting one. Like in 1960 something, there was a blackout that wiped out the whole power across the whole city. Almost nothing happened. In the 1970s, there was a blackout and there were riots and fires. So in 2003, 2 years after 9/11, there was a blackout in New York City. All the streetlights were out. And what happened was many New Yorkers jumped into the intersection and started directing traffic, because there was no other way for cars to know. So just voluntarily, there weren't enough police. They voluntarily jumped in. And it was there was almost no crime. There was almost no, it's an opportunity to be up to mischief. And I think that's because there was a camaraderie at a city level, at a large scale, millions of people level, where we were like, okay, we're in this boat. We have a problem here that we're all facing at the same time in the same place. Let's get together and make sure that we get through this.
That is what's an external threat, and this unites people. No? The other aspect is our decentralization point.
Yes.
If we succeed, and apparently we succeed as it works, it could work. Huh? Yeah. If you decentralize larger entities into smaller subsystems, huh? Working like overseeable democracies, let's make it this way, and then it could work. No? Mm-hmm. And the others, this is one trajectory. The other scenario is we are as you said, we are comparable to the fall of all. Okay. We're speaking about decentralization, about direct human contact, no? And about the possibility to co-decide as a citizen, as a civis, to co-decide about the fate of my city in the end. And this we said in the morning, this is an essential element of community, the possibility of co-decision.
Right. I'd like to go back to what we said this morning. I'm sorry if I'm returning on Testaccio as a model.
No.
Which is not only a model to me on urbanism, but is a model of democracy, of community. Because as we said, thanks to the Committee for the Moral and Economic Improvement of Testaccio, it was possible to solve the problem of the bankruptcy of the Comune di Roma. It was possible to solve the problem of labor. It was possible to solve the problem of immigration. It was possible to solve the problem of urbanism, architecture, epidemics, because also the etiology applied on design. But everything started with a bottom-up system and not a top-down, because it was first people, together with the sociologists and the economists and all these other people, that identified the problems and suggested the solution. And then it was some architect that was translating the will of the entire community in something that was proved working perfectly at many different levels. Mm-hmm. Today, when we talk about participatory program, many times we are dealing with a pseudo participatory program. When we have I don't know if it's correct in English, the environmental impact evaluation.
Yes, that's right.
It is always something that is made after, just to demonstrate a result that is decided before starting. And this is completely wrong. And the same thing is happening with the participatory program. We have a lot of cases where it was decided a priori something to be done. Then it was organized a false architectural urban contest to realize something. And then when the project was also almost already decided who was the winner, because many times the architectural contests are designed according to the name they want to promote, they make some false participation of people to say, what do you think about? Just to clean your face, which is exactly the opposite of what has to be done. And now, because we are talking about urbanism and architecture, we are talking about these things. But any aspect, any decision is taken, we don't know where and by who. Because at the end, in Italy, I have the level of comune, the municipality, then the level of the province, the level of region, the level of state. But who's deciding? We don't know. Political parties are belonging to different parties, because I can have the municipality that is administered by the so-called, because we can no longer believe in parties, but let's say it belongs to the left, and the region that belongs to the right, and they're fighting one each other, because to approve something you have to pass all these layers, and simply because they are belonging to different parties, they do whatever they want to cast the shadow on the other party. And then there is something that is to be decided at central level, because earlier, talking about the parking lot and the laws and the decrees and the standards, we have a law that is at the Italian level that has to be applied at the regional and communal level. So in my hometown, I can change the rules of the minimum standard without changing the law at the state level. And who's deciding and where? We don't want to sometimes expose ourselves naming the responsible. But many of the things that have been decided in Italy after Second World War are because of Fiat car industry. The cities that have been transformed. You are talking about the EUR today. The EUR, it's a district that was designed for the Universal Exhibition of Week in 42 that never happened, to celebrate the fascist era. So it would have been, considering, also what is happening now with the woke communities, would have been probably after Second World War, the first thing to be teared down, because it was really the celebration of fascism. If we want to put even architecture in among those things to be blamed, because this is ridiculous, because if we have to demolish a symbol of urbanism and architecture built by a tyrant, we have to destroy the planet, because no one of the emperor, no one of the pope, no one of the king was a good person.
No.
So it's wrong to put on the same level, for instance, all these polemics that have been done on great name of architecture. So that's another problem. But Fiat car producers were pushing, the Fiat car producer were those that after Second World War decided to complete the EUR that was planned to be just some temporary structure for the exhibition to celebrate the fascist era. They decided to pay for the development of that place, which is a parade of building. It's not a city. It's a parade of monuments. It's not a city, because there is no fabric. But clearly it was extremely important to promote a new way of conceiving city dimensioned on cars instead of humans. And it's not a case if the word autostrada, motorway, highway, use the name you want. The first autostrada was designed in Rome for the fascist decision to open a connection directly from Palazzo Venezia to the sea, which is Via Cristoforo Colonna. That is the first place where the word autostrada be used.
The first artist is interesting.
So, because it was something that was designed for the linear city dimensioned for cars. So, laws, decrees that were approved were decided by a car producer that impose a series of rules. And it is funny that they never pay taxes in Italy. Today, the Fiat car is based in the Netherlands, but they are still influencing the decision taken by the politicians, because they have to sell the cars. They have to make our addicted on cars. So that's why I'm saying it's a plutocracy, because we can have all the best ideas, but we need to do a podcast and a symposium online, thanks to the freedom of the web. It's the right vehicle to talk about things that have been hidden for decades and decades, bringing us to a point of no return. I think we are still before the point of no return, but we need to start to make a theory. We need to start talking about responsibilities. We need to put our face and say, okay, this is the responsible. Maybe we cannot blame Le Corbusier, because Le Corbusier was a dreamer and he didn't envision the consequences of his crazy theories. But now, after so many years, keeping his name as the name of divinities is just ridiculous, because as has been well demonstrated, the failure of these theories. And we need to do something to shake up those that are imposing the student this model as the model to be emulated and say, okay, they made their attempt, they were wrong in scratch from zero, and now it's time to restart, not from Renaissance, but from the moment where we fell asleep.
Mm-hmm. Good. That's really good.
Yes.
And what we do with plutocracy?
Revolution.
History says revolution. History says,
Yep, it does.
Stop that. I'm quite sorry, but I gotta get in here at this point again, and I'm a Democrat by passion, and I'm a, this. Of course, everything you described was quite correct. There's influence that shouldn't be there, but it's not only the car industry, it's the banks, it's all the other industries, it's everywhere else. So what we need in fact to try to get it more leveled is some other pressure groups who can make this pressure as well in the same way. And I guess during the past decades, we witnessed that by the environment movement, by the Green Party coming up, by several other social organized groups that just raised their voice to bring a more equilibrium in the discussion, and not only to have big companies rule politics. So I guess we got an image that's a little bit broader, but of course. It has always been the same, that groups interested in having something, who had enough money to do their thing, articulate, they always did this. It started in the Roman Empire and probably even before, that we had some important people who had their interests and who brought them to politics and who saw their interests being a law in the end. So that's a very long tradition, and it's just because people do that, and everyone takes the biggest part out of the soup, as we say here in Germany, as all the others do, and some are more successful than the other ones. So we shouldn't abandon politics at all as we do, and just to say we have it in let's quote Aristotle, what the three good forms of government and the three that are the bastards of them. That's the democracy, the plutocracy, it's the aristocracy, it's the kingdom, or it's the tyrant. You always have the two ways, and in fact it's possible to see the same person from two perspectives. So you got the tyrant and the king at the same time, and at the same time you got the democracy and the plutocracy and the aristocracy much the same. So I guess we got to get used to this, because organizing a society is a difficult thing to do at all. It's so many interests, so many different aspects you could consider, and which one is the most important one? Which one to put first? That's an important political question. And of course, you can't do everything with the same passion, with the same amount of money in the end, with the same taxpayers' money, of course. But in the end, someone is responsible. It's the one who made the law, and the laws are made by parliament. And if you do not like the laws they made in the past legislature period, then you should vote for another party, or vice versa. If you like them, just keep them. So I guess that's a strong connection without always getting exactly what you ordered. That's the difference between politics and a restaurant.
Yeah, it's a good point. It refers to what we discussed yesterday about central management versus a decentralization as two major forces. On the one hand, we need some kind of central management, also some organization, some overarching organization, like street systems, electricity, nationwide, and so on and so on, for instance.
But there are cases, even in Italy, there are 4 regions that are called Regioni a Statuto Speciale. They have to respect the Italian law, but they have some autonomy in deciding some measures. So many times there are comparisons that are very easy. It's like the shooting on the Red Cross. Because the efficiency you have in Trentino Alto Adige, it is insane. It doesn't appear as Italy because they have an autonomy and they cannot decide on their own in a proper manner. And you can see cities that are well maintained, are in a good order, because there is this decentralization that in that case is really taken in consideration. The rest of Italy being all under the umbrella of the government with the laws that are not diverging in any direction from the imposition, which is obsolete. Because the decrees, we were talking about the parking. I'm fighting on this argument because the Italian law on urbanism is the first cases on this planet of copy and paste, like you do with the word on your computer, because it was approved in 1942, immediately after the publication of the Athens Charter by Le Corbusier in 1941. So it was made a law that is managing the urbanism of the entire country according to the idea of the zoning, according to these crazy ideas, which were worsened in the 1967 when the decree 1404 and 1444 were made, deciding which are the minimum standard to be made. All laws that are, one is dating back to the fascist time and on the idea of Le Corbusier, and the other one in the 60s when the worst theory of urbanism were made, thinking at numbers to justify the speculation because of the massive investment that arrived after Second World War in the 50s and were obviously very interesting for those that were making the speculation. So we have laws that are belonging to two very different, but in the same time, two very similar dramatic moments of our history that needs to be changed. If we want to think about the way of changing urbanism, we need first to change the laws that are imposing a way of designing cities, which is completely wrong. And this is something that has to be approved at the state level. The only region which are not affected on this are those regioni a statuto speciale. For instance, in Sicily, where for other reason, because of the poverty, because of whatever you want, because of mafia, which is a gift left by those that promoted the unification of Italy to destroy from inside the Bourbon states, they don't have the same wise manner of managing the autonomy, but it's the only region where it was approved a project of restoration of historical centers that is bringing back life in districts that were abandoned, in historical centers that were abandoned, when in the 50s, 60s, they were promoting the abandon of historical cities, as we said yesterday, because it was the evil place of the evil bourgeois, and for the emerging working class it was necessary to have the New Jerusalem. People that were moved were really deported in the outskirts after years of living in this horrible condition, decided to go back to the historical center where, thanks to the master plan made by Benevolo and Cervellati in the middle of the 80s, so a moment when the worst thing were happening at the urban architectural level, they approved a project that was allowing the reconstruction as it was where it was. And this now is the motor of the local economy, because a lot of craftsmen recreated their activities because they are building with the beautiful plaster details, beautiful blacksmith work, beautiful wooden work. It is incredible to walk along the Via Loro in Palermo and see what is happening. Walking in Siracusa Ortigia that was abandoned and now is a wonderful place. Mm-hmm. Because people understood that living in the outskirts was wrong, was better to live in a more welcoming places. Yeah. But this was because they have this autonomy. So if that works in region where you have autonomy, this is the demonstration that this idea of being all under one central control that has no possibility to manage correctly things and does what it's horrible to say that, but there are doctors that because don't know how to solve the problem, they give these antibiotic with a large spectrum, which at the end are not caring anything and eventually are creating a side effect because you are reacting on antibiotic and there is the abuse of the antibiotics. It's not possible to say that there is a medicine that is valid for everybody. It's necessary always to make case by case. And the only way to control case by case is to have a polycentric control which takes care about the very local needs that are different. Even in Italy, that is a small country, are very different because the needs I have in near the Alps are far away from those I need in the south of Italy, where the climate is completely different. The number of inhabitants is completely different.
And that question of central versus polycentric control and regional kind of sensitivity to region and need is really being brought forward in a profound way right now in the United States. And that's because, the vast amount of money leaves people's pockets and goes into the coffers of the federal government. And now the federal government is weaponizing that against regions. So for example, a massive infrastructure project has been underway for decades now to build new tunnels for trains underneath the Hudson River. The current tunnels are as old as all the descriptions in Testaccio. They were built in like 1908. They're literally like they move around in the muck underneath the river. And it's just like the most important economic connector in the Northeast is the Northeast corridor in general, like the highway system and the train system, not, for moving people and goods. So that project, so it's been obvious, here's an infrastructure project. It already was killed once for a political reason. Then it was killed a second time for a political reason. And now it's being killed a third time. It's in progress. Money has already been allocated. Work is underway. But the federal government, these past weeks said, we're going to take $20 billion. And also that's being applied even to the city, where the city has just gotten everything lined up after a huge amount of local politicians and community members getting together and prioritizing a new transit connection that would go up to a very needy population that needs better mobility. It was all lined up. It was just breaking ground. It was, we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that also was shut down by the federal government. So what does that mean? That means like we are sending our own money to the federal government, who is then robbing of us making use of that money the way that we want to use it to improve all of our lives, right? And improve at the same time the whole country, because this is like one of the major economic generators of wealth in the whole nation. So how could we be in a governmental system where we are letting our money disappear and we don't even have the ability to then do anything for ourselves? That, so that's a profound condition in which that is not sustainable. So either we have to fix all the mechanisms of democracy from the local to the highest level, or we have to decide that system is no longer viable. And that's going back to what are the things that make us together? What are the things that make us one nation or one group of people, whatever it might be? Now, the democracy that you're talking about brings us back to square one, which is how has social media possibly improved decentralization of decision-making, or allowed more voices to be told, or organized people that's protested by the millions, the last few days, right? There's no doubt social media was a huge organizing vehicle for that kind of democratic expression.
It's a blade with the double. It's a knife with the double blades.
Yes, right.
Because unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are using the social media in a proper manner, and others that are using on purpose to destroy what is coming from those that are trying to do something. The fact checker, for instance, they are there on purpose to accuse whoever is diverging So it's a quite a problematic way. Depends on the level of what are you talking about.
Right. Yes.
But at least at the level of developing cities, there is a freedom because until now there are not much fact checker for whoever is talking about the traditional urbanism and architecture. Used to be, honestly, at the very beginning, I remember when I started with my blog talking about these issues, I was accused to be fascist, to be communist, to be populist, to be anything. But this was the story of Aesop, of the fox and the grape. Because you are not able to do it, you will say that is wrong. But step by step, thanks to the growth of the web and thanks to the creation of a lot of blogs that are talking, or Facebook pages, Instagram pages that are promoting what is happening all around the world that is unknown, there is an incredible mass of young people that are considering, more than considering, are fighting against the ugliness. The name of the groups are quite powerful and extremely active in denouncing wrong things and promoting good things to make people awaken. Because we fell asleep, as I said earlier, 80 years ago, and it's time to change. My blog, I'm talking about urbanism, architecture, urban sociology, art, which are my main interests. From May 17, when I created, now it has almost 3,000 readers. And I'm not making any kind of advertising. It's just essays to talk about these things. This means that there is a great interest on the subject because people are really upset of what is the environment we live.
So I think I'm happy to make my first summary comments, and then I think, you should do the same. But I think if I were to conclude anything, there's more expertise that you can always bring into this room. To your point from the beginning, this is a multidisciplinary conversation. If we had, some discipline diversity here, but we could have had, you can always have more. Understanding the side effects is one of the things I'm always going to remember about these 2 days, which you mentioned many times, that, the intelligence of thinking about the organization, the physical environment of the built environment, which is our profession, right? What we've spent all of our life dedicated to studying and then executing and then also teaching back to our students. The built environment is a highly complex condition. It can have side effects, unintended consequences, but it's been treated overtly ideologically, for these 80 plus years, for sure. And therefore, it's a contradiction to all of our other notions of knowledge, human knowledge and science and investigation, that we don't treat the built environment with the intelligence of looking across history, of looking at success and looking at failures, of trying to objectively determine like the guiding principles and the guiding strategies, and knowing that changes, that there are adjustments that happen from different environmental conditions, from different cultural conditions, and so forth. I think we're saying that the issues of community, democracy, citizenship, identity, they are linked to the built organization of society and the built environment. And so maybe more built environment professionals need to recognize those implications and have more conversations that are helping them be sure that that they have consideration for these things when they're, advising, say, the people that are making big, important decisions. Ettore's done a great job. I think I'm very thankful for you being here. And I think he's done a great job of telling us how many, that there are many things that are like opposite of the way they need to be. Like these laws on books that are now anachronistic and misguided, and they've just been sitting there for all this time, or that are, the popular notions of sustainability are really upside down so many times from what would be a true sustainability, or that the computer screen has convinced us that if we can make a rendering of it, that we can execute it, and that, that's the reality. And we know that social media, a major part of our conversation, is a double-edged sword. Just like I started with that Thomas Edsel quote, and in that article, he definitely made an effort to get the two sides of the equation. People arguing that social media is clearly having an impact on our polarized society, on the breakdown of systems and senses of community. At the same time, other people arguing that it's raising voices and giving an opportunity for conversations and voices, or even communities, as we heard Nahid say online yesterday, that, she found community at an important moment in her life through, social media. So I think we've addressed nicely the range of questions that we set out to address. By no means have we found any silver bullet, but I think Ettore's constant point in this conversation was, that we don't need to be the guru. We need to be the honest investigator and humble investigator that always can mine, successes, look to this history, look to the environments we can observe today that are living environments, and understand the successes and failures. That's certainly what Jane Jacobs, I'm sorry, I promised more Jane Jacobs today, and we didn't quite deliver on that. But, Jane Jacobs, in this remarkable book, as a non-built environment professional, she wrote one of the most important books ever written about humans in cities, right? And she did it through observation. So the understanding the problem the city is, that's the name of one of her most important chapters. And in that chapter, she says, well, for the 80 years, or in her time, 40 years plus, people were trying to simplify the city and make it into a diagram. Diagrams are fine, but there are many diagrams of the city, but they were trying to make the whole city into really one diagram. And she said, no, it's about, there's a complexity to the city that you can never resolve into that simple diagram. And it's more like a natural organism, like understanding the flow, the flow of people, like the flow of blood in our veins, right? And so forth. So I think we've moved the needle in an interesting way. And I think what we certainly set up was a really great environment in which we can compile all this into a special issue publication, which all of us can contribute to, but we can also obviously have additional people maybe who might see the broadcasts of this and be interested in contributing. And they can take any subset of this conversation and try to bring their additional expertise. Maybe they see a gap in our conversation that they can bring in and add more expertise. So I think it's been a very fruitful 2 days. It's been great to have all of you as collaborators in this process. And so now I think it's on to the next step, which is disseminating what we've done here, but also then looking to disseminate it in another form, which is continued research and writing.
The disseminating is the important point to continue. We just started, and it was important to have started. Now let's continue. And what we could do in regards to continuation is this would be my wish, to commonly define which are major directions to be researched in the next future. So the special issue is good. So that's one thing. But how to continue first in researching in further directions we have to speak about. Then the different directions. So we have the social aspect, we have the built environment, and this I like very much. to restaurant tradition in the built environment in the sense of they had already good urban forms, practice proved. What we can take from this for making new built environments as a frame for community development. This is one direction, and the other direction are social questions. Space is also social space, in particular today in fragmented societies. This could be another direction. What's about a new form of ethos and collective consciousness as a premise of having an ethos? You must have some common consciousness. What it is all about, what we are, no matter if explicitly outspoken or not. It can be also an unthought known. So we the Athenians are the Athenians because we're the Athenians, but everybody knows it, as without explicitly knowing. And these are all questions of collective consciousness. So let's call it collective consciousness, some common consciousness, and the resulting ethos and the resulting ethos. Practically, I would be interested in this viable community approach, which are real projects going on in the direction you outlined. Very, very concrete and practical. And what we could do, and this was an idea we had at our foundation, that Idle Spaces Foundation will develop in the direction of providing a platform over time where also about real practical viable community projects can be an exchange in a way of a very direct form of learning. What we can learn from others, and what are the critical success factors for viable communities? What has to be observed in a very Roman management-like mentality? The critical success factors. The background is I've been trained in the University of St. Gallen in business administration, and thank God, they were the super Romans. And this could be a benefit, to get very, very clear-cut in a strategic manner, outlining the critical success factors, which is important for practical projects, and for viable communities. So this would be the directions I really would like to collaborate with you, and perhaps we have, after we collaborated, perhaps to meet in the course of next year, let's say in the course of next spring or so, in order not to postpone it until infinity, to make a new workshop with this, as what we found out as regards these directions. First of all, as a condensed into these viable communities and the practical projects, what we can learn from them. What are the common points behind the specific cases of the respective project? And this would be my...
I wanted to say perhaps it could be a possibility for the next workshop to speak about artists, rooms for artists, exhibition rooms, and other cultural things for living better. This also could be a theme. This time it has been the graphic, but perhaps next or over next time the artist things. I think it's also very important for a good living.
Absolutely, because there is no possibility to separate architecture from the sister arts. Architecture itself without the sister art is almost nothing. Architecture without a craftsmanship is almost not, no, it is nothing. It's a building, is not architecture. And this is something that is absolutely fundamentally important to be understood. A space that doesn't have a feature is not a space. A space that needs a feature needs the artist to make a feature. So all these aspects are extremely interconnected. And it seems interesting that you are asking about the necessary presence of the arts and artists. because I was listening at the two of you, I was thinking at the only wise speech made during the fourth Siam of 1933, that was made by a friend of Le Corbusier, that was the only non-architect there, that was Fernand Léger. And Fernand Léger, really, his speech is a monumental speech. I published the English translation of that. It was really a slap on the face of all these elite, as Le Corbusier like to say. Because at a certain point, after leaving them talking and talking about this absurd idea of the functional city to destroy the dysfunctional that was the historical one, and as we said yesterday, today we recognize that the only dysfunctional city is the one that was promoted as a functional. He said, stop. You are running too fast. Forget that you are an artist. You are dealing with urbanism, and urbanism is a social. Watch behind you. No one is following you. People are lost. Stop, watch around, walk in the dust of these people, try to understand them, and work in continuity with them. Obviously, his fantastic speech, it was, now I try to resume what he said, but his speech was really an incredible warming message that was delivered but not taken by these people. And I think that was also the origin of this big, long discussion between Le Corbusier and Gideon, who was leading the Siam, that brought to this correspondence fighting, really, with the very powerful letter written by Le Corbusier to Gideon, say, I don't care about the quality, I care about people, decision maker waiting for ours. And at the end, he came up with this Starter that was really a crime against humanity, because the city he inherited after these ideas were wrong. And if they would simply take in consideration the opinion of an artist, probably it was another story.
We can take into consideration artistic aspects. The more, since when we are oriented towards the traditional roots of traditional cities, art is central there, of course. No? And we could consider for this viable community direction, what could be also commonly influenced, what could be meaningful, how to spell it in English, what could be meaningful expressions of art for today's viable communities without neglecting the heritage. No? Also they had the art in their fountains, in their public places, in their statues, no doubt. No? But what could be also in order to trying to reach younger people, are there any forms of expressions of recent art that can express the idea of community in the city again?
Well, this is a big drama, because now you are opening a wound that is already bleeding in my art. Because, I studied School of Art before being an artist. So I'm also professor of art and an artist. And so this is killing me, because unfortunately, if we watch around today, art is consumerism, is no longer art. The value of a masterpiece is not according to the aesthetic aspect, but is according to the value that is a consequence of the power of the smoke vendors, because I can't use a different word to define the merchants of art and the expertise that are talking about the art. So the economic value. I took part to debates where they were talking about art, but they were not talking about the piece. They were talking about the value, which is ridiculous, because you can't have art that has been transformed in finance. And today, what is called art is a conceptual art, which is another funny thing, because I like to make an exercise with my students when I bring them to Naples. And since there are always a modern installation, which are, to me, an offense not only to cities, but also to tourists, because tourism, it's one of the most important aspects of the economy in Italy. And there are people that deserves respect. People that are spending €1,000 or dollars or whatever kind of monetary value they have, to come from the other side of the world and visit the places and find the places how they are dreaming about. And sometimes they are forbid to watch these things because there is some crap in the middle of the space that is disturbing the view of this.
Deliberately.
Yes, this is something that is, for instance, happening every year into the transept of the Church of Palladio in Venice, in San Giorgio Maggiore, where it is never possible to see what is happening there because there is always some horrible installation with a nonsense. And this is offensive for those that are spending money to come and see something which is impossible to be seen. And there is always some explanation made by the smoke vendors of the moment that is even changing the meaning of a masterpiece. Like, for instance, when Anish Kapoor made some ridiculous installation in the center of the transept of Venice, of San Giorgio, that was called Assumption. It was on the four corner, 6 gigantic fan that was compacting a smoke coming from a central cylinder to make a column of smoke. And this was called Assumption, simply because it was going up. But the same crap was made 12 years earlier in Tel Aviv with a different title, with a different meaning. And later on, 5 years later, was made in São Paulo do Brazil with a different name, a different meaning, which means that the meaning or the concept behind the masterpiece could be adapted according to the places, which is ridiculous, because if you make a masterpiece, that masterpiece, no matter the location, is always that. So it's a way to use artists as a money machine. So I bring the students to Napoli, we visit the Cappella San Severo, and we visit the Museo Nazionale Archeologico, and in the Cappella San Severo, they can see the Jesus Christ covered with the shroud in the last breath, which is a breathtaking masterpiece. They can see the Pudicizia, which is the modesty on the left side. They can see the Disindanno on the right side, and they are shocked. They're simply really, they almost had a Stendhal syndrome simply because of the incredible beauty, the incredible skill of those sculptors that made these masterpieces. And then we do the same when we go to Museo Archeologico, and I bring them to the Bull Farnese, which is showing this incredible myth of Dirce and Amfione Zito that are linking this evil lady to the legs of the bull, and there is the ghost of the mother that was killed. So there is an incredible meaning behind the masterpiece. But whoever watched these masterpieces fell in love without knowing what they are talking about, simply because whoever can appreciate the beauty. Beauty is not something that is possible to be described and is not something that could be imposed. I can't convince you about the beauty of something if you don't feel that that is beautiful. Then there is an additional value that is the concept, is the meaning, which is something that is an extra value, but is not the value. So I can talk about whatever I like, but if you like or not, it's up to you. And whoever can recognize the beauty, whoever can recognize the imitation of nature, if you want to use this definition of beauty. So today, art is a serious problem because it's no longer art, it's finances. So who's going to make the feature for the piazze? My proposal I wrote a long time ago is to open the storage spaces of museum where there are a lot of forgotten pieces, and until the sculpture don't learn the way of doing real masterpieces, we can use a piazza to display these forgotten things, because in any case are lost, because are forgotten for decades into the storage spaces. Let's put in a piazza, let's reuse it as it was possible up to the 20s of last and 30s of last centuries. There are a lot of columns, a lot of basins, a lot of ancient things that were adapted to become a fountain, to become something.
Yeah.
Why? Because of this ridiculous idea of falsification of history and this hyper-protectionism of something it's just a cover of dust. Why we have to make prisoners these masterpieces and we have to display this crap, by modern sculpture? I'm very direct. As I said yesterday, politically correctness is not my job. I need to take a position and I do it. There, who loves me can follow me.
The one would say, oh, there's lots of beauty in that steam rising up to the air.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for asking me this, because I always make some parallel cases, which is when you go to cinema and there is a movie where you would like to kill the director because it has no meaning. It's something that really makes you exploding on the chair and waiting that the movie ends up. You get out of the movie and you say, oh my God, this was really horrible. How? And then there is always the person that wants to appear more educated than you and say, oh, you can understand. Could you explain me? It's too complicated. Shut up. Shut up. Because this is what is happening today.
Nice. That was very concise. That was good.
All right.
Right. Well, I think maybe the schnapps. We're ready for the schnapps.
Haben wir noch Schnaps? He likes Schnaps.
So, that was a metaphor.
No. We have very good old Schnapsaroma or Fabergé.
All right.
Okay. Very.
All right. I think it's a wrap.
Or
say something. No, I think
It's interesting that the last word was shut up.